Welcome back to the Metal Exchange. Justin and Chris back again, this time, for the first time, covering a Swedish classic, Therion's Vovin album from 1998. I cannot believe it has been almost 30 years since this thing came out, but alas, here we are. But before we talk all things Therion, how are you, my friend?
I'm very good. I'm looking forward to this, as this is probably the first deep dive I've gone into a Therion album, or at least like a pre-2000 Therion album, or even like pre-2010. I've been keeping up with their newer stuff, but the old stuff, it was always like one of those things where I was overwhelmed by the amount of albums. I mean, this album came out, like you said, in 1998, and it was their 7th studio album. So I think by the time I got into metal, it was kind of like, Jesus, there's a lot to catch up on with this band. So I'll just wait 30 years and till we have a podcast, and then somebody will request it. And I mean,
force you to listen.
Yeah. Thankfully over the years, I've had people like Mike and Caleb, who both are fans of this band, kind of point me in certain directions song wise, but now it's nice to actually sit down and listen to an entire album. And we have lots of commentary that we received from both the man who requested the album, Mr. Brian Hewler, and also our friend Sean the Metal Pigeon, who I reached out to for his thoughts, because I know he is a big Therion fan. So yeah, this is a discussion I'm very much looking forward to.
Yeah, I'll share my thoughts on the band before we start, or at least my thoughts going into this week. But several things that came out this week that I think are noteworthy. First of all, new music from Mirath, Wilderness of Mirrors. Their new album has come out. And a lot of people are kind of saying it's a throwback album in many ways to Tales of the Sand and some of their older material. I don't disagree. I do think that there's several tracks that are kind of a callback in many ways. I thought it was a really solid album, really well produced. It sounds good. It's a catchy listen. If you're a fan of this band, you do not want to miss this album. If you've never heard of the band, you should check this album out. I think that most people will not be disappointed. They are rolling, as it were. They really haven't released a bad album, and this might be one of their best.
Nice. I have not had a chance to listen to it yet, outside of a couple of the singles that have been released. So I am looking forward to getting to check that out. But I did get to listen to the Evermore album that you recommended last week, Mournbreed, and I enjoyed it quite a bit. I look forward to going back to that. But yeah, really solid power metal to go along with the Power Paladin album that you mentioned as well, as two of my favorite power metal albums of the year so far. Throw in Vandor and Love Bites into that conversation as well. Been a pretty decent year for power metal up to this point. I guess we're officially a quarter of the way through the year. So yeah, good. There's some good stuff so far.
Yeah, no doubt about that. On the prog side of things, a band has come out with their first album in 14 years. And when I heard that this was coming out, I was excited because I remember really enjoying their debut album. The band is out of Norway. They're called Dimension Act. As I mentioned, in 2012, they came out with an album called Manifestation of Progress. Their new album, Labyrinths of Life, has just been released. It is that epic brand of melodic prog in the Circus Maximus type of vein, the Seventh Wonder type of vein that I think you'll particularly enjoy. I'll try to post one of their tracks this week so you can check that out. I think you'll appreciate that. And another song that came out kind of staying in Norway was a band called Lex Legion. It's really featuring several members of King Diamond, including Mickey D, Andy LaRock, Pete Black, and Hal Patino, and Nils Rue from Pagan's Mind on vocals. Kind of an interesting blend of that old King Diamond style, but with a modern flair and modern production. I thought it was a pretty good song. I think it's worth checking out.
So this was not a tag team name towards the end of WCW where Animal and Lex Luger were a tag team together, right?
No, but I feel like it's a missed opportunity for sure. What should have been. But have you? I know a lot of people were talking about this track. It kind of dropped out of nowhere. Did you get a chance to listen to this yet?
No, not at all. I will though, just because everybody has been talking about it. And plus, I listened to a bunch of other singles. Do you have any others you want to mention? I have a few that I want to do.
No, go for it. Go for it. The floor is yours.
Oh, I love the floor. So my dog sleeps a lot of the time. We were blessed enough to receive a promo of the new Vanden Plas single, which is an acoustic version of Far Off Grace. They are following up their 1996 EP Occult, which was an acoustic EP with some covers and stuff on it, with Occult 2. This is the first track from it. Great, you can't go wrong with the original or this version, but they also will be doing a cover of Boat on the River by Styx, as well as Nothing Else Matters by Metallica, and then filling out the rest with versions of Holes in the Sky, The Ghost Experiment, Healing Tree, Postcard to God, and You Fly. So that comes out on June 12th on Frontiers Records. Thank you, Frontiers, for sending us that. I have something that I bet you haven't heard, because I didn't even know it existed until a couple of days ago, but Tarja has released a new single, and it's 10 minutes plus long, and it's called At Sea, and it is just this very...
Ahoy! I had no idea this existed.
Yeah, it's a very just symphonic and orchestral epic tune. I don't think I've ever heard a Tarja solo song quite like this, but it's really good, and if you're a fan of her vocals, I mean, she's definitely a legend. I enjoyed this quite a bit. There's something nostalgic about hearing Tarja's voice, because it just reminds me of those early days of Nightwish. So definitely recommend checking that out. That'll be on the next playlist whenever that comes out. Although adding a 10-minute song always helps expedite the releases of these playlists.
I will definitely post that track this week as well. I want to give that a listen. I'm really curious. Do you know who has been writing her songs, or has she been writing the songs herself? Or
I'm honestly not really sure. I always assumed she wrote her own music, but I'm not 100% sure. Apparently, I'm just finding this out now. She actually has a new album coming out on June 12th as well. And the album's called Frisson Noir. It comes out on Ear Music. So I guess this is the first single from it. Quite the single at 10 minutes plus. I think I paid the $2 instead of $1 for the usual single, which I think is fair for a longer track. But it's I look forward. I enjoy Tarja's solo material. I don't know that it's quite as dynamic as the stuff she had done with Nightwish, but it's just nice to hear her voice. And it looks like there will be a track with Marco on it on this new album. So that's something to look forward to. Really cool track. Just a very dramatic, orchestral, symphonic tune that I think, feels like a journey because of its length. I also mentioned that I was going to listen to the Take On Me cover from Mortemia with Marcella Bovio on it, and it did not disappoint.
No, it's a magical combination. It sounded great.
Yeah. And it kind of forced me to go back and listen to some of the other tracks on the cover collab sessions. And there's a lot of really good stuff on that. But this was great. And it's kind of funny because it comes right on the heels of Iron Savior covering this track also on their new album. But that's some of the new stuff. I also just wanted to quickly mention, because I don't think I had as of yet, Diana Leah, vocalist for Delane, also has a solo project called Daya, Dyyya, and she released the first single from that. It's called Holy Water, and it actually kind of like melds some hip hop elements with metal, and it's a really cool tune. It has a very kind of almost dance like kind of beat to it, but if you're looking for something a little bit different, I think it's definitely worth checking out. Like, she actually does like some like rap lines, which is really kind of cool. So I think that is pretty much it from me this week. But yeah, lots of handfuls of singles and stuff. Did you get a chance to listen to the new Armored Saint song? I was curious what you thought of it.
No, it's in my queue. I'm going to get to that as well. I have hopefully some time tomorrow, and I'm going to check out a bunch of these singles. As I said, I've kind of been focusing more on the albums as they've come, so that I can kind of digest everything together. But I did hear that Armored Saint had come out with some new music, and I look forward to listening to that because I enjoy them thoroughly. We will be covering them in the not so distant future. I'll just give a little spoiler.
Cool. I've always been a fan since I first started listening to them, which was not that long ago. But they have Emotion Factory Reset coming out on May 22nd on Metal Blade Records. Close to the Bone is the first single from that, and you'll enjoy it. I mean, it's kind of like just what you would expect from them, and that's not a bad thing.
Yeah, looking forward to it, like I said, and want to see them live just because every time they bring it live and they never, ever disappoint. So something to check out, and obviously that album will be out later this year as well. I want to shift gears and jump into this Therion album and just kind of set the table a little bit, both first for the album and then kind of my exposure to the band. The album Vovin comes out May 4th of 1998. And it was around this time, maybe a year or so later, that I first got exposed to the band because I had never heard of them. But I remember going to Sam Goody at Roosevelt Field and Mike walking out with a Therion disc. And to this day, I don't know how the band got on his radar, and I don't know why he bought it. It was not something that anybody in our circle listened to. Do you have any recollection why he bought this album? It was the first time I had ever heard of the band, let alone heard a note from them.
I have no idea. I think it was Crowning of Atlantis. Was that the one that he bought?
Yes.
It had like it had the Manowar Thor cover on it, and a couple of live tracks and stuff. I had asked him during the week, actually, like if he had the Vovin album, and he said that he did. So I wish you had asked me that prior, because I would have asked him. Maybe I'll text him and we'll get an answer before the end of the episode.
What inspired that? And to be honest, even when he got the album, I don't remember actually listening to a note. It was almost like this was his band and he was a massive fan. And when I first heard them, they didn't click for me at all. And I remember I would go and kind of check out some of the albums as they would get released in the 2000s. And I mentioned this last time. I really did enjoy Gothic Kabbalah. I thought that was a fantastic release, but everything else I've heard from this band, and I'm not going to say I did a deep dive into all the albums, but everything else I had heard was like, I don't know, it just never grabbed me. And so this, if nothing else, forced me to sit down and listen to one of their classic albums many, many, many times. And so I want to thank Brian and everybody else, because I think multiple people have selected this album and asked us to cover it. So thank you to everyone, including Brian. But this was a homework assignment in many respects for a band that up until this point I never got into. You were obviously more of a fan than I was. Do you remember what your first exposure to them was? Was it Mike's purchase of that album, or was it something else?
I'm sure I think the first thing I ever heard was the song to Mega Therion. I know he was a big fan of that. I mean, he sat in those rafters with us at Prague Power and waited the whole set for them to play. I think it was like this second to last song they played, and he hung in there. That was if it wasn't 2 hours, it was close to it. It was a meaty set. And I was mentioning to you earlier that I actually have that set on DVD. It was on one of their DVD releases. I forget the name of it, but it came out in let's see, I'm just scrolling through here. Probably 2011, because it came out after the Citra Ahra album in 2010. And I think that was the album the band was touring at the time that they played at Prague Power. And we actually talked about that whole Prague Power festival, like in very long form on our last bonus episode. We covered Prague Power 11 and 12. We were hoping to talk about 11 through 15, but there were so many stories and memories that
we didn't even get close.
Yeah, I think it's going to be like 2 per episode going forward, because there's just so much to unpack. And I also think as we get closer to the present, we'll probably remember more, and therefore the stories will be longer. Anyway, I have texted Mike. We'll see if we can get a response out of him before the episode is finished, and what possessed him to buy that album, because it did feel like it was kind of like his find. Like everybody kind of had their own bands that they kind of found on their own. Like I was pretty proud to like introduce Sonata Arctica to like Pat and our friend group, and so Mike's claim to fame must be Therion. But since then, I think it was through my friendship with Caleb that I started to, he was a fan, and so I started listening to more. And then when I found out that they were headlining Prague Power, I started to, more so listen to like whatever their current set list was around that time. And so there were a lot of random songs from throughout their discography that I learned fairly well. Wine of Aluka, from this album being one of them. That was one of the more memorable tracks that I recall hearing from them. But I have to say, seeing them live made me more of a fan. I was really, really impressed with the whole stage performance, because they have 4 lead vocalists essentially that all seamlessly just take turns like moving to the front of the stage, and it's a really impressive thing. And if you do a little digging on YouTube, you can find there's clips of them playing at Wacken where they have like a full chorus and a full like string section and stuff, and this music definitely deserves to have all those musicians involved, because it is very symphonic, and there's a lot of choirs and stuff, so like that's pretty cool. But that said, with a limited personnel at Prague Power, I thought they really put on a hell of a show, and I think that they definitely earned that headline slot.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I will say that I caught part of that set, and I just was not in the headspace for it at the time that I was watching it. I was going through something that night, and I remember just being like, I am not into this at all, and I almost would like to see them again, just because I wonder if it would land better. I was just not in the right place for it at that particular moment. And for those that don't know, in many ways, this particular album was considered a kind of the Christopher Johnson side project, if you will. He plays guitars and keys. He's joined by Tommy Erickson on guitars and Wolf Simon on drums, John Kazda on bass, and a slew of other supporting vocalists and musicians. But really, this is kind of considered his solo album, and it was the best-selling album for the band. It sold over 150,000 copies in Europe alone, so it's a tremendously successful release for the band. But I want to kind of lead, before we go into these tracks, with what Brian had to say, because I think it's a nice primer for our in-depth discussion. He says, Vovin, in the late spring of 98, I was co-hosting a local metal radio show called The Root of All Evil on a local public radio station in Minneapolis, Minnesota, when we received the promo copy for this album. I was already a fan of the Swedish band after hearing 1996 album Feli. That album introduced more symphonic elements and a choir to their ever-evolving sound. Vovin takes this to a whole new level by adding a small orchestra to the ensemble. Led by guitarist and keyboardist Christopher Johnson, this album cooks you right from the start of the rise of Sodom and Gomorrah. I didn't know this until doing some further research on the album, but he considers it to be the solo album under the Therion name, as he is the only member of the original lineup on this album. This would be a pretty common occurrence throughout their discography, along with several guest appearances on each album. This album features Primal Fear's Ralph Scheepers performing vocals on The Wild Hunt, former Cradle of Filth member Sarah Jezebel Diva performing vocals on most of the album, and Theater of Tragedy's Lawrence Aspin playing the Hammond organ on the Draconian Trilogy. This is Therion's best album, and I think it upped the game in the symphonic metal genre. The opening track, which I mentioned earlier, sets the tone for this musical journey. The second track, Birth of Venus Illegitima, is the perfect follow-up track. And then things really pick up tempo-wise with the third track, Wine of Alacqua. And then they slow it down for the amazing track, Clavicula Nox. The track was also recorded with male vocals in place of the female vocals for the Crowning of Atlantis EP, which gives it a very different vibe. This takes us to the next track, The Wild Hunt, easily the fastest track on the album, accented by Ralph Scheepers' soaring vocal performance. Eye of Shiva is another beautiful slow-tempo track leading into the epic-sounding Black Sun. This takes us into the crown jewel of the album, the Draconian Trilogy. Broken up into 3 tracks, the opening, Morning Star, and Black Diamonds, not to be confused with Stradivarius's song by the same name. The final track really is the perfect song to end the album. It's one of those songs that feels like the end of a musical journey that is so satisfying right up to the final note. I hope you guys enjoy the journey as much as I have. Thanks, guys. My song of the week is The Birth of Venus Illegitima. I think that is a perfect encapsulation of these tracks. And as I was listening to the album, I couldn't help but think to myself that a lot of the stuff that I heard on this album reminded me in bits and pieces of other bands. So I'm going to make note of that as we go through this. I will say up front, I don't think I like it nearly as much as Brian, but I understand why people like this album and like this band. But for some reason, I still struggle with them quite a bit. And I think it's the vocals more so than anything else, because I'm used to having the one front person, whether they're growling or screaming or singing. This is just so much opera that it's I find it a little jarring, but I totally can understand the appeal. And some of these tracks I really did enjoy. Others were a little bit lost on me, but I'm really curious to see if the songs I liked were some of the songs that you liked the best as well.
Sounds good to me. Shall we get into it?
We shall. And as Brian mentioned, this kicks off with the 6-minute and 45-second The Rise of Sodom and Gomorrah, a track that they continue to play live and a track that I remember hearing the name of, but I don't think I ever recognized the tune because I don't know that I had heard much, if anything, off of this album prior to this week. What really jumped out to me immediately was the strings that just kind of hit you right in the face during that bombastic intro to this track. You can tell they're clearly building to something. It's a solid riff, tons of Middle Eastern flourishes, and obviously the song title would lend itself to that. The choir is such a different touch, and it's really not my cup of tea necessarily, but it does accent the music exceptionally well on a track like this. The soprano vocals especially I thought were fantastic. And then I'd argue that the violin really steals the show. And this is like the first reference that I'm going to drop. I actually hear touches of Royal Hunch Tearing Down the World. And when I heard that, I thought of you immediately. It's a slightly repetitive tune, but it is rather catchy.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you get what Therion's all about right from the get-go, because it's, the first minute is just, classical music at its finest. And then those guitars come in, and now you're hearing that meld of metal and symphonic, symphonic style music. And then the voices come in, and I guess this is probably where we're going to diverge, because I love that the choir, and it's something that I think doesn't get used that often in metal. And I think that I'm not a historian by any sense of any stretch of the imagination, but I don't know that there was very many bands doing what Therion was doing at this time on this album, where I mean, granted, they predate Nightwish, but I think that Nightwish kind of maybe hit it. It was probably right around the same time. I think this album came out the same year as Oceanborn, but I think that what Nightwish was doing was symphonic metal done in a power metal style, whereas I think Therion was doing more of like a really just symphonic, orchestral, classical style music, but with metal flourishes. And so you really get that, that classical style of classical string instruments and a choir, but then you also have heavy metal guitars and drums and bass to kind of accompany
it.
Yeah, exactly. And it really makes for, I think, this really unique and awesome sound. And so, like, I think this first track kind of really just drives the point home. Like, this is what Therion's all about and what they sound like. Because, I never listened to a ton of the early Therion stuff, but they started out as a death metal band, and you don't really get very much of that at all at this point in time. Like I mentioned before, this is their seventh studio album. But I think this song makes for a really great. It's really like an extended intro because there isn't really like a lead vocal or anything. It's really just a very symphonic track with like these with the choir singing, but it really just feels like an extended intro before the birth of Venus Illegitima.
And I agree with you. I felt it sounded like an extended intro the way it builds. Brian loves this second track. What did you think of the birth of Venus?
As soon as the vocals come in, I just get like so like excited about it. Like it's just such a cool, to me, like this is so many styles that I enjoy all coming together into one band. And so like I don't know that I'm gonna have like too much to like pick apart, I think, from each track, but this was one of my favorite tracks on the album for sure. Like I love the particularly the higher pitched voices. I think I had seen an old video of them performing this song at Wacken or something, and they actually had like the full choir, and it sounded so cool. I almost feel like that, like, I don't know. I remember we've like talked for years about how does Rhapsody do a show without an actual symphony orchestra and a choir? And it sounds like they're finally addressing that. I think Luca Turilli is doing shows, I forgot, probably in Europe and maybe South America, I don't remember, but with a full orchestra, which is like kind of how I always wanted to hear Rhapsody performed live. And I feel like with Therion, like a song like this, like it's almost like hard to picture it without that choir. And I love the dichotomy of the deep voices and the high voices. It really works. It works for me. And there's towards the end of the song, like there's more, I feel like the strings get a little bit more, instead of just being an accompaniment, they actually have almost like solos in a way. But I really like this a lot as a first track. I have not heard even till now like a ton of albums that sound like this. I feel like it's very in its own league.
The closest comparison I would make is a band like Haggard, who we talked about way back in the day. There's elements of that. Now it's a different style, obviously, but the feel of the album was very similar, and I could not help but think about that when I was listening to it. I will say that I like Birth of Venus Illegitima as well. You're going to think I'm crazy, but the beginning almost reminds me of something off of Streets by Sabotage, and even the riff had a bit of a Sabotage feel, albeit with operatic choirs behind it. I think I would prefer this song with like a little bit simpler vocals. And if John Oliva sang on this track, I think I'd be all over this. It was just a bit much otherwise. Solid construction. I like the cadence and I love the instrumental sections. And I did like the track, but it wasn't my favorite track on the album. Ironically, though, the next track was Wine of Alakwa was a really awesome tune. It has this really haunting start with the keys and the strings that gave me like vibes of Adagio, another band we've covered in the archives, with just a very prevalent string section. And the song picks up really quickly. Upbeat drums, again, a very prominent string section. The riff was rather chunky, and I actually preferred this quite a bit to the prior tune. It had a lot more of a power metal feel to it. The verses were great. I thought some of the bass lines were good. The chorus a bit more direct, with the male vocals kind of leading the charge on this one. And then the instrumental section reminded me of Skylark, right down to the thin production. I thought this track screamed 1998, and I liked it so much that I'm going to make it my song of the week. So let's give a listen to the Wine of Alakwa, and then I want to hear your thoughts on this, the third track. So that was Therion's The Wine of Alakwa. I'm curious about your thoughts. The power metal vibes on this, I thought might be something that you really gravitated towards as well. Was I right, or is this not one of your favorites?
No, it definitely is. I actually thought about making it my song of the week, but I'll go in a different direction since you chose it. There was like a time where this song would get stuck in my head and I couldn't figure out like where it came from or why it was stuck in my head. And I was like, I know it's a Therion song. I think it's a Therion song, but I don't know what it's called. And I remember, I think at some point I finally just like broke down and like played the beginning of every Therion song until I figured out what it was. And I featured it on my Play the Old Shit Volume 2 playlist back in 2021. In between Dimensions, Eleanor Rigby cover, and a live version of Vision Divine doing The Whisper with Michelle Lupi. So this is a fun playlist. I like going back to some of these Play the Old Shit playlists where I add songs that I never put on a playlist back when they first came out and probably should have at the time, including a great tune from Synergy called Midnight Madness. But anyway, I've always really, really liked this song a lot. It probably was like one of my most played Therion songs of all time. So I had a feeling that it might be your song of the week, just because I feel like it's a little bit more up tempo and I think it just has a little bit more teeth than some of the other songs where it's very kind of mid tempo classical music. And this, I think, just has a little bit more excitement to it. But I love that, like that frantic violin, man, is like that's the part that I remember the most. Like at the beginning, like it just feels like there's this sense of urgency to the string section, which I thought was really cool. And like it feels like it has more traditional vocal lines instead of just kind of like background, choir singing. So yeah, really, really great tune.
Nice. I'm glad you liked it. I didn't realize you liked it quite as much as you said you did, but that's great. I'm not at all surprised. And then we get to the fourth track, Clavicula Nox, and this one has a really ominous sounding low end. And I kind of like that nice use of the cymbals. I thought it provided this sense of like intrigue and mystery, a slower cadence for sure when compared to the prior track. And the female vocals on this tune remind me a lot of like what Liv Kristen was doing with not only Leaves' Eyes, but Theater of Tragedy before that, like a really gothic sounding tune. Around 2:15, it starts picking up before it slows back down for the next verse. And again, you're kind of anticipating where this is going to go. And the payoff actually comes in the form of a beautiful instrumental acoustic guitar section, which I liked quite a bit. Not my favorite song on the album, but very well constructed tune for sure.
Yeah, it's a really like, I feel like it's a very deliberate song. Like, even though it's kind of a mid-tempo tune, like you said, it has, I think, a lot of distinct parts where the song sounds different. I really like the last like 2.5 minutes or so where you really get to hear the guitar work. I just really enjoy that part of the song. But for the rest of it, it's a pretty haunting tune. Clavicula Nox is actually a Latin phrase meaning key of the night, and it is used in the process of transforming the unconscious into lucid conscious. So it does kind of, I feel like the music really does fit that description, because it almost feels like almost like some sort of musical incantation. So I thought this was a cool tune, and again, it's kind of like what I would expect to hear from a band like Therion. This is the longest song on the album. Even if you combine the 3 Draconian trilogy tracks, this still is a bit longer. But I think that it just has enough parts, enough unique parts of the song to make it really interesting and not feel like a slog at almost 9 minutes.
Nice. Again, I had a feeling we might be a little, I don't want to say different, but have a different opinion on this one. They were smart to kind of piggyback off of that long epic tune with a kind of a shorter tune in The Wild Hunt. This one's a bit of a banger right out of the gate, I would say. Solid riff, again, kind of leading power metal, especially with some of those drum parts and fills. The chorus is actually really thrashy and very catchy. Obviously, Ralph Sheepers stands out and sounds great during that chorus. He's got such a recognizable voice, not only with Gamma Ray and Primal Fear, but when he does guest spots like this, you know that that's Ralph Sheepers. You don't have to think about it. And it's definitely a highlight. It's a really cool song with a great guitar solos at the end. I was a fan of this one as well.
Yeah, I'll make this one my song of the week. I think it's, again, like you said, it's a really great use of Ralph Sheepers' vocals. I also think that it's almost kind of like a precursor to Snowy Shaw's vocals when he would join the band later on. It's kind of, his is a little more like almost like screechy and high pitched, but I think that it's kind of I want to say that maybe the range is kind of in the same, I don't know. There's something about it reminds me of later on when Snowy would be in the band, and, him and Thomas Vikram would be the two male vocalists that would kind of go back and forth. And Thomas had more of the classically styled vocals, and Snowy had more of the, like insane, black metal kind of squeals, if you will. This is more squeals. Ralph Sheepers is a little bit more, traditional power metal sounding, but it does a really cool job, I think, of combining the like eerie choir, but with Ralph Sheepers' vocals, and it's weird because like this album doesn't really feel like it has like a voice in so far as I mean that like there's not like a lead singer who you keep hearing and it goes back to, and you're like, oh, there's so and so. It's really the choir, I think, that is the voice. And so to hear Ralph Sheepers and kind of have a more individualized voice, I think makes the song stick out a little more. Plus, it's fast paced. It's a fast song. It's in and out under 4 minutes. It's the drums have that gallop to them. It's just a really catchy tune. And if you're kind of on the fence on Therion, but you like power metal, I feel like both our songs of the week are a good starting point. With both the band.
I agree.
And the
I think
album.
that's part of the reason why I gravitated towards both of those tracks, because especially with this, I didn't, again, not that the choirs are bad. It's just something I have not yet come around to, I guess, and at least totally. And so this one really stood out for that reason.
Yeah, it's totally fair. So why don't we give it a listen? This is the Wild Hunt. And no, I don't mean Sean.
That was the Wild Hunt. Not to be outdone by the next track, The Eye of Shiva. I thought this was a really aptly named tune because it really had this cold, dark vibe to it. The bass on Eye of Shiva was extremely prominent. The verses are rather subdued but remain very dark. And then the female vocals lend themselves to the music perfectly. I absolutely adore the orchestration on this track. It reminded me of some of the older Opeth material. Sparingly used but perfectly employed would be the way I would describe it. The instrumental section, however, and the end of the tune remind me of TSO of all things. It really liked how the song had these separate and distinct parts to it. This was probably my second favorite track on the album. I really thought this was a phenomenal tune.
This was actually a single. I want to say it was released before the album as like a radio single. It had radio edits of this and Birth of Venus, as well as the album versions of Rise of Sodom and Gomorrah and Eye of Shiva. So I'm guessing it was released by Nuclear Blast as like a promo for the. I mean, I don't know what radio stations in this country were playing Therion. Maybe Charlie probably was. I can't think of too many others, but
Brian obviously was playing it as well, as he mentioned.
Yeah, right on. It was probably more like college radio type stuff, like not Z100 for sure, but
I don't think so.
Yeah, I really like this song too, and one of the main reasons I do is that I just absolutely love those soaring soprano vocals that you hear in the choir. I feel like that's just not something you hear super often in metal, and so I just appreciate that. It's when I hear those notes that I feel like they're gonna make even Labyrinth's vocalist blush, glass shattering everywhere and everything. I'm like, I've never had any real desire to attend the opera or watch an opera, but if it was a metal version with these kind of singers, like with Therion,
this is really what that is.
I would.
Therion, it really is a metal opera.
I would watch the shit out of that. I would think that would be awesome. So this is a cool track. It's much like Clavicula Nox. It's kind of another deliberate mid-tempo song, but again, because I think there are different sections of the song, it makes for a really interesting listen. And I like, your comparison to TSO is really apt, I think, towards the end, because it just feels like those metal drums and electric guitars mixed with the orchestral parts and the choruses really solid way to end the tune. I like this one a lot as well.
Nice. And before we get to the epic trilogy, there's another tune called Black Sun. What did you think about this one? This one has a bit of a different feel as well. I wasn't as crazy about this one, but I want to hear your thoughts first.
Not to be confused with My Black Sun, which was a song that Peter Griffin sang on an episode of Family Guy once. If you know, you know. This is also not to be confused with Freedom Call's Black Sun. Again, I think it's another one of those just kind of mid-tempo gothic kind of songs. Like it almost has a march-like gait to it. It picks up, I think, like all of a sudden the tempo kind of picks up towards the end and then closes out the track. I'd say it's probably not one of my favorite tracks either. It's solid though, for sure. And I think that it's a good, palate cleanser in between the Eye of Shiva and then this Draconian trilogy. That's a good 8 minutes or so once you combine the three parts. But it does kind of have, much like Rise of Sodom and Gomorrah has kind of like a long intro vibe to it. Black Sun kind of has like a long segue kind of vibe to it to me anyway. I really like the instrumentation on this album quite a bit, particularly the guitar work. But again, it's like, I don't know that there's like a ton of vocals. It's like they're sprinkled in here and there, the choirs and whatnot. Yeah, it's a solid tune. Not, in my opinion, there's really not a bad song on the album. Though, as always, there's just ones that, we might like more than others.
Well, the way it starts out with the keys and the strings, it almost reminds you of like the soundtrack to a fairy tale. And although the choirs here kind of fit the tune, I wonder if it would have been better served as just a straight up instrumental. I don't hate it, but I want to like it more than I do. And for some reason, it loses me a bit. I think it would probably be awesome to see live, as the song features several changes of pace. The last minute or so, I really enjoyed. I thought it was great. And I love the way the guitars, wind up picking up the piano melody from the intro, except now you hear it on the guitars during the last minute of the song. It almost reminded me of something that you would hear in a Castlevania game. So there's parts of this I like, parts of it I don't love. But it's an interesting tune for sure. And again, there are parts of it I love. And then you get into this 3-part Draconian trilogy, which is not as epic as it sounds, as you mentioned. It's not that long of a tune, but they are lumped together. And part 1 is the opening, which is really a string-heavy track that kind of kicks off the trilogy. The guitars complement the strings to perfection, and the classical nature of the tune reminds me of like Yngwie's Concerto Suite in many ways, as the way this thing starts off before you get into Morning Star, which is a more proggy tune that kind of reminds me of early Queensryche without Jeff Tate. The male choir almost sounds like black metal in certain ways, which was kind of cool. This was an interesting song that I did like. Not my favorite, but I liked it quite a bit. So before we get to Black Diamonds, your thoughts on the first 2 parts of the Draconian trilogy?
Just so you know, if you listen to Draconian Love by Avantasia directly after this, then you have a Draconian quadrilogy. So something to think about when you're making playlists, at home. But this
and if you play an entire Draconian album before it, I mean, you could go on for hours if you really want.
That's like a Draconian.
Did you think about that?
It's a Draconian suite, if you will, perhaps
exactly.
An epic suite. Not an illusion suite, however. Whatever happened to them? Anyway, this whole thing is one of my favorite tracks on the album, and I think that each part does a really nice job of sticking out in its own way. And like you said, that first part is very Yngwie, the orchestra. What is it called? The classical.
The concerto.
Yeah, the concerto suite. Yeah, just with that little bit of electric guitar noodling over the string section, and then it slows down into what I think is becoming the what's the word I'm looking for? The consummate Therion sound, that mid-tempo kind of gothic. I feel even though they're more so known as like a symphonic metal band. I think there's a lot of gothic elements to their sound. I don't know that that's like a real, a huge discovery. I'm sure most people have made that connection, but this is another one of those tracks that I think has that kind of vibe to it, and it pretty much the second part maintains that mid tempo. It's almost, I think, where Therion feels the most comfortable, where they're just doing that really march like tempo, and with the string section and the choirs, it's just for whatever reason, it's for me, it's like a pretty nondescript song, but it's really enjoyable. Like, it's just, I feel like everything that the band does well, they're doing it all really well on this track. And I just really enjoy it. I am really into listening to the full choir sing along to, these beautifully orchestrated string sections with the guitars and the drums. It's just a marriage of a lot of aspects in music that I enjoy, and it all comes together really nicely with this track. Curious your thoughts on the last part, Black Diamonds.
It's another proggier tune, but it almost feels like this haunting ballad with just a touch of heaviness. It has this like finality to it, or a finality quality, where the choirs sing together and it sounds awesome. This is, I thought, maybe some of the best uses of the choirs on the album. And the way it ends with the last 30 seconds with the strings and the piano is great. I thought this was a great tune. I just wonder if they should have closed the album with it, because it has that feeling of like finality or closure. Not that Raven of Dispersion is a bad tune, but Black Diamonds is so good. If they would have cut the album here, I would have been happier.
Yeah, I feel like especially that last like 2 minutes or so, it's just a very dramatic. It does feel like they're kind of wrapping things up. But, I will say, like, I feel like we didn't talk too much about the just the title of the album, Vovin, which in Enochian, which is an occult language. It means dragon, and the lyrics in this is part of the song are literally red dragon burning again and dragging down, red dragon flying now and casting down stars and ancient angels. So like, I feel like this is particularly, I mean, it's in the name, draconian. This is kind of, I think, probably where the album birthed its name from. So yeah, I kind of agree that it probably could have ended the album, and no one would have batted an eye, because Raven of Dispersion is kind of a weird song, especially like,
yeah,
there's like some sort of sound effect that almost sounds like what's that thing that you like use your hand to change the
theremin?
Yeah, it sounds like it's like this creepy ass theremin where it's making like these like ghost like kind of sounds. This is a really creepy song. Like, this album so up to this point has been, dark and gothic in a lot of ways, but this one is just like, this one kind of gives me the willies.
The cadence is really a bit slow, and it's kind of plodding. The samples are kind of cool. It's like this space age horror film thing going on, but it is creepy. And although the vocals are fitting, I just think that, with the exception of like the female soloist, which I guess is Sarah Jezebel Diva, something about this track makes it not my favorite. It's really kind of anticlimactic. And although it picks up as the song goes on, it doesn't really save it for me. If you would have put this before the trilogy, it probably wouldn't have fit on the album. But at the same time, you didn't need anything else after Black Diamonds. So this was a bit of a miss and kind of ended the album in a bit of a weird way for me. But yeah, creepy as hell for sure.
I think I initially thought it was like a bonus track or something, because I felt like it didn't. It felt like it just was a little bit offbeat on an album that has some offbeat moments in it. But I definitely think the highlights are definitely the soprano vocals again. Made me think of some of the Xandria singers, of which there have been many. But over the years, probably Manuela comes to mind if I had to think of, name one of them. But I think that it comes to the end. I think is the best part of the song. Like the last minute or so, I think it really has a very dramatic kind of end. I don't know. I don't mind it. It's just it just feels like it might have been better suited somewhere in the middle of the album, I guess. But I'm not docking any points over the placement. I think there's been so many albums that we've talked about where like that's come up where like, well, it could have ended and then they made a choice, and and there's just some like offbeat kind of odd song at the end there. And sometimes it's a Japanese bonus track and other times it's not. But I think the last minute or so really, I think, kind of saves it for me. And I think it makes the album end on kind of a pleasing note. So I did actually get Mike to get back to me, and he honestly didn't even remember. He just said, if I had to guess, it was probably me taking a chance on an album that looked metal. So, I mean,
yeah,
that was
there you go.
a fun thing about, walking into a slip disc or back in the day, or even like a Sam Goody, where your options are way more limited and you're just like, well, maybe I just buy this album by, I don't know, who's this band? Elegy. This sounds interesting. And then next thing you know, it's like, sometimes you just had to do that. Sometimes, thankfully, I don't remember buying too many dud albums like on a whim.
I had a couple.
Yeah, it happens. That could be a bonus episode topic. The random
the duds in our CD collection.
Random duds.
Blind buys.
Yep.
Actually, would be a fun chat. I've got, sadly, many of them. I should go through my CDs and be like, all right, here are the top 5 duds that I purchased.
And then we'll light them on fire. I'll have a little. We'll put on some Therion and we'll light them on fire. Before we reveal our scores, I wanted to share Sean the Metal Pigeon's thoughts on this album. Like I mentioned before, he is a big fan of Therion and has been for years. For those not aware, he is co-host with our friend Carrie the Metal Geek, and they co-host the MSR Cast, which we've had them on our podcast a couple of times. We're due to have them back on again. As long as we don't do any more Monkeys albums, I think Sean will be game. But his comments were, Therion's Vovin is an iconic symphonic metal album, in my opinion. I'd even describe it as a landmark recording for the subgenre. I strongly feel that it was the first complete metal album purposefully written to infuse real symphonic elements into metal music, where the orchestral parts were key components of the songwriting instead of just serving as mere accompaniment. That these songs would sound incomplete and disjointed if you remove the orchestral parts from the mix. I have to say that is really spot on, in my opinion. I agree. Yeah, Sean, that was really well said. He goes on to say, the success of the band's breakthrough album, Theli, allowed Christopher, I believe it's pronounced Janssen, if I had to guess, to employ an actual chamber string ensemble here, and you could hear the spacious ambiance and warmth it leads to this album. So much of the music on Vovin has a beautiful, meditative, almost spiritual quality to it, such as Clavicula Nox and Morning Star. Nothing preceding this album sounded quite like this. It was such a revelation, and it was the second release in an incredible decade-long run for Therion from 1996 through 2007. So thank you, Sean, for those comments. I think that you put into words so succinctly what I have been struggling to do for the last 45 minutes. So we have additional commentary from Mike before we get to our scores. We're really dragging this out. Mike says, I bought the best of first. It was a cardboard digipack. I was 17 or 18 and dating Danielle, so that's how long ago it was. So there you go.
If you know, you know.
Yeah.
Right?
So curious to hear where this lands for you. I kind of have a hard time guessing what your score is going to be based on how you've described the album, but I'll let you go first.
So as I mentioned at the outset, coming into this week, I was really not all that familiar with them. This was not my favorite album of theirs. I think if I went back to Gothic Kabbalah, I'd probably still like it that much more because I remember really enjoying it when it came out. Probably would have made a top 50 list had I made it at that time. That's how much I thought of that particular album.
And I should mention that's the last album of that run of albums that Sean mentioned.
Yes. And I think that might have been their climax for me anyway. Although, again, I don't know the ones that came before it all that well. There are parts of this that I like. I would really like to see this band live again because I think that at this point would be a transformative experience for me. I think the production on it suffers a little bit. I don't think it sounds all that perfect, at least with the benefit of modern hindsight. So for me, it's a 6.5. It's a better than average disc, and I appreciate what they're trying to do. It's just not my cup of tea, but I don't hate it. And I think it was actually higher than I thought I was going to give it going into the week because I was never a fan of this band. But I'm not going to yuck somebody else's yum because I can totally see why somebody would kill for this band. I see why. I don't. It's not that I don't see it. It's just that I prefer to listen to other things. But it was a good album.
Yeah, well said. I'm going to give it an 8. I really liked it a lot. It's just, like I said, a marriage of a lot of musical styles that I enjoy. I mean, I was in a choir when I was in high school, and it was an all-male choir, so we didn't get to enjoy some of those beautiful soprano and alto voices. But I really want to dig more into the run of albums that Sean had mentioned. There's definitely songs I know better than others. And there's even a pair of albums that came out on the same day, a la Guns N' Roses' Use Your Illusion with Lemuria and Sirius B, which were the two albums that preceded Gothic Kabbalah. We'll definitely have to circle back to this band again. Kind of surprised it took us this long to get to them in the first place. So thank you, Brian, for that request. I enjoyed this a lot. And again, just why I really just enjoy the request aspect of the podcast, because I think that there's just stuff that I think isn't on our radar a lot of times, and that we get to take the time to dig into more than we would have otherwise. And this is, I think, one of those albums. So thanks to both Brian and Sean for their contributions to the episode. And I enjoyed this a lot.
Very good. Very good. Just two quick news items. First, a summer tour featuring Deep Purple, Kansas, and Jefferson Starship, set to take off August 4th in your neck of the woods, Raleigh, North Carolina, starting at the Red Hat Amphitheater, going all the way through September 12th, where they finish up in Sparks, Nevada at the Nugget Event Center. About 30 dates or so featuring these three classic bands. Kind of a cool show, something that I would actually be really curious to check out. And so if the timing works, maybe I'll go to Jones Beach and watch them when they come to Long Island. And the Nevermore replacement has been announced at Prog Power. Last week, we announced how they had to pull out of the show. This week, the replacement, Ashes of Ares, featuring Matt Barlow on vocals, doing a special set, really an Iced Earth tribute, singing all of the Dark Saga in its entirety. And if you're a fan of Iced Earth, you know how many classic Iced Earth tunes are on that album. So something that fans of that band will certainly enjoy seeing at Prog Power. So happy for those that are interested.
Have you heard any of the live clips of the first Nevermore reunion show?
Yes,
because everybody's been raving about it.
It sounds incredible, and it sounds so natural, and it doesn't sound forced. But the singer obviously has his own flair. I'm very much looking forward to seeing this set whenever it comes to my neck of the woods or wherever they come to, because this is going to be really good. The clips were fantastic. Yeah,
I almost felt bad that it happened so quickly after the news came out that they weren't playing at Prog Power, because it was almost like a kick to the crotch that not only are they not playing at Prog Power, but you're going to miss a damn good show on top of it. So
exactly. But alas, I have no doubt that they will be playing stateside as soon as humanly possible, because there's a lot of fans that want to see them. And, they're not a band that shies away from touring and that sort of a thing. So it's only a matter of time. But with that said, we move on to next week. I feel like it's been a while since you've selected an album. I am so curious as to what you have in store. I know that this has been one that I think you've planned for at least a little while.
Yes, it's really just the next album from a band that we've covered their first two albums from, and now I have deemed it the time to cover the third. And the band is Sonata Arctica, and the album is Winter Hearts Guild. It came out in February of 2003. I didn't really feel like waiting for an anniversary, so I'm just throwing it out there. My next selection will be for an anniversary, so we'll get to that in a couple of weeks. But this was an interesting release, just because I think that there was, the first two albums were so well received, and it was kind of like, all right, let's see if they can continue on this streak of albums. And one of the interesting things about it was that their keyboardist Mikko Harkin had left the band, and so Jens Johansson actually comes in and does some keyboard solos here. I think Tony handled like the rhythm keyboards, but they got Jens Johansson to do some of the heavy lifting, and who better, fellow countryman, or no, Jens is not from Finland. Jens is Swedish. He just happened to be in a Finnish band. So from fellow countryman band Stradivarius. And as always, Jens's keyboards are always so distinct and easy to pick out. And so I remember like listening to this album and being like, this sounds like Jens Johansson keyboards. And sure enough, it was. So I don't know. I'm guessing you probably haven't listened to this album in a while, so I'm curious to see where how it holds up after, 23 years it's been since it came out.
Wow. I haven't listened to this album in a long time, and honestly, it's interesting because I love those first two Sonata albums so much that when this came out, I remember thinking it's good, but it's less than. And so I'm almost wondering if I even have any love for it at this point, because I don't even know that the nostalgia was there for this album. The band got really popular off of this album, and a lot of these songs would stay in the set lists for a long time in the live setting, and they were able to tour the States on this album and stuff like that. But I remember thinking to myself, this was not as good as the first two. So I actually look forward to going back, because I almost have an axe to grind with this album because it was just not as good as the first two.
I remember it feeling like uneven, and so it's going to be interesting to kind of jump back into it. I'm going to ask you to also listen to the B-sides. There's two tracks on the Broken single, Dream Thieves and The Gun. There's a Japanese bonus track on the album, The Rest of the Sun Belongs to Me. And right around the same time, the band released a cover of Metallica's Fade to Black that was on the Tribute to the Four Horsemen compilation album. So I figure we'll hit up all the stuff that was recorded around this time. Because actually, I've always said Sonata Arctica is one of those bands that I think always had really outstanding B-sides for some reason, like just really great songs that didn't make it onto the main album, including, I think on their next release, they actually did a cover of Vanishing Point, which I actually got the story from the guys from Vanishing Point, that they opened for Sonata Arctica on some shows, and they, I guess, took a liking to them and asked them if they could cover one of their songs as a B-side. And so they did. So that's kind of cool. We'll definitely cover Reckoning Night at some point in the future. And then the band, I think, really starts to take an interesting detour from the speedy power metal band, went with Unia, and the band really just goes on quite a journey, just stylistically speaking, from this point on. But with Winter Hearts Guild, we're still in the throes of the young Finnish power metal speedsters. So there's a lot of songs on this album that are still to this day some of my favorite Sonata Arctica songs. There's some really, really good songs. I was just, the last time I listened to it the other day, I was thinking to myself, Song of the Week's going to be a tough call for me. So I'm looking forward to talking to you about this one. I'm pumped to see what you have in store for us the following week. And I have something that I'm particularly excited about the week after that. So we're in April, and we march on.
April is going to be an interesting month off the heels of a really interesting March as well, just based on the diversity of albums we've been choosing and had chosen for us with the requests. So thanks to all who are listening. We appreciate you. Give us a like and a follow if you think we deserve it. And obviously, consider joining our Patreon. It really does help the podcast continue on. So consider joining that as well. And I look forward to talking to you next week about all things Finnish power metal.
Same here. So take care. Brush your hair.